By a show of hands, how many people here in the chapel tonight participated in the bread baking craze during the COVID quarantine? Not so many. Oh, Sarah's mom. Well, I will confess, I was in it and now I'm out of it. As we recently experienced, from what we saw all over social media, from what we learned by searching for flour and yeast, there is something life-affirming about breaking bread. It makes sense that during lockdown, people who love the kitchen spent hours there. But then there are those, like me, perhaps like many of you. I am a culinary klutz. Other than the desire to eat, I have really no interest in cooking, and even less talent for it. And living in New York City, where there is a fabulous bakery, at least one fabulous bakery in every neighborhood, I have never felt the need or desire to bake. But that all changed for me a few weeks into quarantine. I felt driven to mix and knead, roll and braid, proof and pull. I set out to buy ingredients for bread, and I quickly discovered that baking had become a viral contagion of its own. The spring of 2020 saw increases of 200 to 500% in demand and production of flour in cities all around the world. But I was determined. I hunted down flour and yeast in 3 grocery stores before giving up. At the last store, I asked the cashier if she had any idea when they might get some of these suddenly essential supplies. She reached below the counter and pulled out a bag of flour and said to me, "Here, take this one. It's the last one we've got, and the next shipment isn't coming for a while. I have enough flour at home for a few loaves." I protested, but she insisted. "When I run out, someone will share with me. That is what we do for each other." So now I had the flour, but procuring the yeast was even harder. I ordered some on Amazon and received an email saying it was coming from China and would arrive in 5 weeks. I turned to the obvious means of communication and posted on Facebook asking if any of my Manhattan friends knew of stores that still had yeast. As comments echoing yeastless woes filled my page, our doorman buzzed to say someone had just dropped off a package for us. I went downstairs and found a bag with a small jar of yeast and an anonymous note saying, "Shabbat Shalom, and good luck with your challah baking." Friends and relatives sent their favorite recipes. I printed out a bunch, randomly picked one from the mix, and that evening, my family enjoyed freshly baked challah. Commenting on this phenomenon, the Spanish bread guru, Chef Ibn Yarza, said, "I think that many people regard bread as a safe place to return to. It is really interesting to discover how, in these moments of uncertainty, people are turning back to bread as a certainty and a place of comfort. Bread is playing its magic role here as a symbol, as it has done for more than 10 millennia. So let's travel back a bunch of millennia to this week's Torah portion. Here we encounter one of the Torah's most famous adages, usually repeated using the gendered language, "Man does not live by bread alone." We use this saying to express that as humans, we crave sustenance beyond the physical. We need to be nourished spiritually, aesthetically, intellectually, emotionally for our lives to have meaning. That is all wise and true, but that is not the meaning of the phrase in its biblical context. Listen to this phrase in its entirety. Moses says to the Israelites, "God subjected you to the hardship of hunger and then gave you manna to eat, which neither you nor your ancestors had ever known, in order to teach you that humans do not live on bread alone, but on anything that God decrees." Taken in this original context, this phrase is not saying that we need more than bread to live, just the opposite. Moses is reminding us that we can even go without bread and still survive, because God will always be with us, sometimes in ways we may not recognize, but they are certain all the same. Moses is connecting two moments with this verse in the Israelites' history. He speaks these words to the people after their very long journey through the wilderness. They stand on the precipice of the promised land, their excitement burdened by the knowledge that for the first time in their history as a people, they will be venturing forward without him. Moses bolsters them by reminding them of what they experienced at the beginning of their journey 40 years earlier. After fleeing bondage and crossing the Red Sea, they peered into the vast desert landscape of their future. Then, too, they stood at the precipice of a new chapter filled with great promise, as well as tremendous uncertainty. These newly freed slaves quickly discovered that freedom is fraught. Unlike in Egypt, where food was easily available, fish, onions, cucumbers, melons, leeks, even garlic for flavoring, now they are in the wilderness, free, but with nothing to eat. God explains that every morning bread will come in the form of a flaky substance called manna, which will carpet the ground. There is and will always be enough for everyone. God instructs each person to gather as much as they need, and also to gather for those who are unable to do so for themselves. Perhaps they are infirm, perhaps they are too young, or maybe they need to stay at home to care for others. Every person should have what they need to feel satisfied. The Israelites are explicitly told not to save any of their daily bread until the next morning. They have what they need, and the next day there will be more. But some people hoarded portions of their manna. When they awoke with the morning sun, as God warned, they found it rotten and inedible. Why did God's miraculous gift have a 24-hour expiration period? It seems completely inefficient. It's because we needed to learn that while the future will always be threaded with uncertainty, we can sleep easy as long as we take care of ourselves and each other. The text lays clear what we recently were reminded as a world community. We can do with far less than we think we need, and there is always enough if we live with generosity. Even today, with people going hungry across oceans and in the streets of our own city, we produce 1.5 times the amount of food needed to feed everyone on the planet. There is enough. I wish I could tell you that my COVID challah was delicious, but I can't. It was burnt on the bottom. It was slightly raw inside. Somehow it spread instead of rising, and it gave off more of a smoky smell than an appealing aroma. Honestly, I don't think it qualified as challah at all. But really, it didn't matter. That loaf carried abundant kindness. It grew from the good gifts of God's love that surround us at every moment if only we open our eyes to see them. It held the generosity of strangers and friends. It connected my family to households around the city, the nation, the world, all practicing a foundational craft that human beings have been doing for centuries. All of that, with thick slabs of butter, made our something other than bread taste delicious. My family savored it with gratitude. As Chef Yarza summed up, the feeling I get is that we are all sharing a common loaf the same way we share a common culture. Whether we bake or buy, at times of ease or during days of difficulty, let us continue to break bread together, always moving forward in blessing. Amen.